what are some of the specific challenges that Christians have historically faced? Like, have they been second-class citizens? Are they excluded from certain kinds of education, certain kinds of public gatherings? Maybe you can give us a few specifics of what that looks like.
Well, in Egypt, there's a spectrum of, how bad it could get. It could be something as little as you might not ever get promoted in your current workplace because you identify as a Christian. And it can go all the way to, we burn your church down, or we abduct your daughters, or, we kill your father. Like all of these things are very real. And the thing is that when we speak of persecution, we oftentimes fail to realize that, there's many different facets to what persecution looks like. And the Coptic Church is a church that, because it lives in a reality where, government and religion work hand in hand, we do live under Islamic law. And because we live under Islamic law, we are considered to be the religious minority. And not just only the religious minority, we're a religious minority that, based on the Islamic faith, we're blasphemers. We do not share the truth that they declare to be true. And in so doing, when you identify as a Christian and you're public about it, you are extremely offensive. And as you know, more than ever today, within the North American reality, when somebody is offended, they believe they have rights over you. And so when you live in that kind of reality, just to give you an idea, I was speaking to a young man just last year who God has given him an incredible talent. He's an incredible athlete. And he had the opportunity to get signed to a very serious professional contract to go back home and to play on the Egyptian national team. Within no time, he packed his bags and he came back, because everyone from the administration, including the staff and the players, made it very clear that they want nothing to do with a Christian athlete on the professional team. That's one example of how it is a person might suffer. But if you go back historically, I mean, this is not even something that is, we don't have to exhaust it. I mean, if you look back at 2015, 21 young Coptic men were martyred on the beaches of Libya for their faith. And they were in Libya just working to try to support their families. In 2017, we had 2 churches bombed in April during the Feast of Palm Sunday. A little bit later, that same year, we had a 7-year-old woman who lived in a very ultra extreme area in Egypt, where there's a lot of extreme religious thought there. And she was dragged through the street naked and embarrassed. This is a 7-year-old woman. And she would have been killed if people had not intervened. But let me be clear on something, and I think this is important to mention. We actually have been graced recently to have a very understanding president who actually sees the people not in classifications of religion as much as he sees them as children of the nation. And so he wants everyone to be treated as equally as possible. But things don't change overnight. When persecution is not seen as persecution, when persecution is seen as a right, when it's seen as a norm, then the people who participate in that persecution, they don't believe that they're doing anything wrong. If anything, they think that they're participating in some sort of cleansing or correction of the societal reality that they live in. And I think this is where it gets really scary, when we are willing to look at people and say, your life doesn't matter, or your opinion should be muted. And yes, I believe in certain values, but you don't get to participate in those values because you stand against me. And when we start speaking in those terms, that's where we see the really ugly truth of how this is simply and naturally stated, it is nothing more than evil. It is truly persecution. And so the Coptic Church has been undergoing this for such a long time. But let me just say something, and I think this is important. I really honestly believe that one of the greatest gifts that the Lord God has allowed us to have within the Coptic Orthodox reality is persecution. Because discomfort has a way of making you very real about your faith. It forces you to get on your knees. Comfort, on the other hand, encourages you to worship yourself rather than to rely on God. When we have lived in a reality where there was persecution, it forces you to look up to him. It forces you to know him, because you no longer rely on legislation. You no longer rely on government. You no longer rely on insurances. You no longer rely on anything but him. It forces you to refocus your life. And I have to say that I don't think that I would be a second generation Coptic priest in North America if it wasn't for my family undergoing persecution, choosing to leave and to immigrate to have a new life for their children, and then passing on the importance of that faith to their kids, because they knew that there would be no chance of survival, no chance of having any sort of hope in life if it wasn't for their faith.